This is Gemara Menachos Daf Mem Hey, and we're holding on Mem Dalid Amid Beis. We're at the Mishnah on the bottom of the Amid as we're back into Menachos world, back into the world of Karbanos, but within the overarching theme that we've been in the middle of for many daf, which is different items which are or are not ma'akev one another, and that difference is going to tell us the level of Ikari, the level of the fact that item is essential one from the other. So says the Mishnah, moving on to the Karban Musaf. Ha'parim va'elim va'kvasim asirim einon ma'akvin zeh. The bulls, the rams, and the lambs of the Karban Musaf, Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tovim, are not ma'akev one another. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, let's say you have excessive parim. You have a lot of bulls, but you do not have a lot of nisachim. The libations, what should you do? You have par echad unisachim. You should bring one par with the nisachim. Kulam nisachim, but they should not bring the parim without the nisachim. So the Tanakhama is teaching us they're not ma'akiv one another, thereby being that you could bring each one without the other. Zakt Rav Shimon, no. Says Rav Shimon, even if you have the appropriate and requisite numbers of parim, you bring just the par with the nisachim. Now, the level of that one is not ma'akiv one another, Rav Shimon is teaching us, as we'll see in the Gemara soon, that only bring the par with the nisachim. So let's see what this means. Says the Gemara, Hani parim ukvasim dehecha. These parim and kvasim dehecha, which ones? So we said when we read the Mishnah, we said the Karban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, of Yom Tif, but the Gemara begins and says dehecha, of which one? If you're telling us about Sukkot, Kimishvat Ksivbu, says the Torah, Kimishvat 2 times, showing us that what? They are essential, as we've seen. Eladarosh Chodesh V'Atzeres, rather Masi Rosh Chodesh, Shavuos, the Chumash Bekudim, as it says in Devarim. So says the Gemara as we turn over to B'mei Amar Aleph, Elim dehecha. Okay, so that explains the first two in the Mishnah. But which karbanos is the Mishnah honing in on when it says Elim? Which karbanos are which Yom Tovim? Which occasion are we referring to that is not ma'akev one another? Idahanu da'ayol. Idahanu, if you're telling me the ones that we just said, which is Rosh Chodesh, which is Shavuos, says the Gemara, it's not Elim. Ta'ayolu in the singular. Ida Tzeres. If we're talking about Shavuos, then the Teres Koyanim Havoyo. If it's talking about Shavuos, as said in Teres Koyanim, Havaya Ksivu. It says Havaya. What does Havaya means? It is. What does it mean? It is means it is essential. Means it can't be without. Means it is 100% ikar. So you can't tell me that one is not ma'akev the other. So says the Gemara, what is the case of a limb in the Mishnah? Responds the Gemara, La'ilam, 3 lines down, Memei Amar Aleph, Da'atzeres, T'Teiras Kohanim. And now you're asking me, it says Avayo, V'achi Kamar. This is what the Mishnah meant. Lo'ilim, T'Teiras Kohanim, Ma'akvi Le'la'ayil, the Chumash HaBikudim. The Elim of Teiras Kohanim, the plural, those are not ma'akev the ones of Devarim. V'lo'ayil the Chumash Bikudim, ma'akev lo le'ilim the Teiras Kohanim. So that is what the Mishnah refers to. So when the Mishnah says the Elim are not ma'akev zeh v'zeh, it means those are Shavuos, are not ma'akev. However, it doesn't mean all the Yom Tovim, which really, right away, we can anticipate the next kasha of the Gemara, because the Mishnah listed a group together. Let's just go back before we even see the Gemara. What did the Mishnah say? Parim Elim, and Kivasim. So it would indicate that all three are the same. But the way that we just explained part of it and Kvasim is different than Elim. Says the Gemara, that kasha precisely. Elaparim. Dafidu adadi lemakvi v'ile dacha dacha hu lemakvi. Says the Gemara, there's no parallelism in the Mishnah. Inu makvi. That when it comes to the parim, they're not even essential to each other. We're talking about the carbon musaf. And now you're telling me when it comes to the Elim in Vayikra, the other ones are not essential, but the ones in Vayikra are. So when it comes to Elim in a vacuum, is that ayil essential or not? It comes out, well, it depends. So it's like a shmak in reading of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, Tani Mili Mili Kitani. You're right, it's not so geshmak maybe, but the Mishnah taught it in two different parts. Therefore, that is Lamaisa Pshat in the Mishnah. Continues the Gemara 10 lines down. The first line is Katani. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the Karban Musaf. Says the Pasik in Yecheskel, some throw in the word Tanya over here. On a Rosh Chodesh, you take a par ben bakar, a complete par, with no mumim, ben bakar, tamim, vishisha kvasim, and 6 lambs, vayil tamimim, and one vayil and an ayil tamim, it should be unblemished. Yiyu, it should be. Says the Gemara, par, my tamalaymar. Why does it say par? Lefishenemar b'Torah parim. Since it says the Torah parim on Rosh Chodesh, I would think it has to be multiples. And how do I know that if then you can't lemaisa find two? Maybe echot hamlamer par. Says the Torah, says par sheishes kvasim aitam eloymar. So when the Torah says Shisha, 6 lambs, what does it mean? Lefisha kazav Torah shiva. It says in the Torah you should bring 7, so you would think it has to be 7. Shisha. So we're delving deeper and deeper, showing us how it's not ma'akev. And basically, you bring what you can. The best is to bring the shpitz. If you don't have that, you'll have to bring less. Shisha yavi chamisha, chamisha yavi arba yavi shleisha yavi shnayim, vafilu echad hamalaymar ulekavasim kasher tasig yadoi. From there we learn out whatever you could afford. So now that we go backwards, now that we says tasig yadoi shisha kvasim lamali, so I need to tell me 6. We know whatever you could afford. Says the Gemara, because the Torah is teaching us that there is a lechatchila. There is a lechatchila to bring 6, and if you could give aldik, if you can't, then kasher tasig yadai. Uminayin shemakvin says et hamaleimar yiyu. And how do we know that if you have both the bulls and all 7 lambs, then they are ma'akiv? Meaning, the fact that they're not ma'akiv is only if you don't have them. But if you have them, then you have to bring them. Says the Torah Yiyu, shows us that they are essential. Continues the Gemara, once we're quoting from Yecheskel, says that Shem Elokim, the first month and the first of the month, you should take par ben bakar tamim v'chat tar ben bakim. Par ben bakar tamim v'chiteisa es hamikdash, and you should cleanse chiteisa the beis hamikdash. Says the Gemara, chiteisa. This word seemingly shows us that it's a chatos, but frak the Gemara, the carbon of Rosh Chodesh is oilahi. So Amar Rav Yechanan, 2 pshat. Amar Rav Yechanan says, Rav Yechanan parsha zu Eliyahu asil darsha. This parsha, Eliyahu Hanavi is going to darshan, and meaning, you're right, it's shver. The word chiteisa sounds like a chatos, and it's not. You have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi. Rav Ashi Amar says, Rav Ashi, I'll tell you a pshat. Miluim ekrivu b'mei Ezra. They brought the Miluim, the inauguration days of Ezra, Iderech, like they were like it was brought in the days of Moshe, the inauguration of the Mishkan, which was what? Which was on Rosh Chodesh, and it was a Chatos. So Darshan's Rav Ashi that you're right. In general, Rosh Chodesh is an Olam, but there is a Makayim for it to be a Chatos. Tananami Achi Rav Yehuda, Omer Parsha Zo, Eliyahu Asil Darsha. This Parsha Eliyahu Navi is going to Darshan. Amar Loi Rav Yaisi says, Rav Yaisi Milu Emekrivu Bimei, Ezer Gedach Shekivu Bimei Moshe. Amar Loi. Rav Yehuda responded, Tanuach Taitcha Shanachta Taiti. You should rest, because you made my mind rest, meaning I can now fathom the pshat. We continue more drashais. I don't know what just happened with the highlighting. Okay, I'll come back in a moment. More psukim in Yechaschol nevela treva min oiv min abeima lo yoichlu hakayanim. Says the pasuk on nevela treifa oifer behema v'kayanim shenayit. So says the Gemara, Kayanim udalayachli, ha Yisrael achli. Sounds like only Kahanim don't eat it, really? And Yisraelim could? Amar Rav Yochanan Parshas Eliyahu Asel Darsha. Ravina Amar says, Ravina, I'll tell you, Pshat. Kayanim etzrich it's a chedesh of Kayanim. Sal gedei dechamina. I would have thought. I would have thought. Since they mattered up Malika, Tishtri Nami Nevelo Trefa, because Malika is a form of killing. It's not a classical shchita, and Malika has very unique dinim. Malika has dinim that be'etzem the animal's considered a shchuta, but at the same time it isn't. It's more that the animal is killed. And if this were to be done, to bring out the point, say the Mefarshim, if this would be done on a stam bird, you go to the market, you buy a bird tomorrow, and you kill it via Malika, not with your nail, that is not kosher. It doesn't have a din, you can't eat it. It has a din of a treifa, it's a din of a vela. So that's the chiddush kamash milan, that the Kohanim could eat it. We continue quoting more psukim. V'chein tasem b'shiva lachodesh meish shoiga. And so you should do on the 7th of the month by meish shoiga, someone who is a shoigeg umipeti v'kipartem es habayis, or someone who's ignorant, you should purify the house. Shiva, says the Gemara, what does the word Shiva mean? Am Rav Yochanan Ilu Shiva Shvatim Shechatu. This refers to the 7 Shvatim that followed Sanhedrin, and they made a terrible mistake. Vavagav shein rubish al kahal, even though it was not the majority of the kahal, still they had to bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. Chodesh, says the pasuk, Im chidshu v'amru chelem mutar. If they come, Sanhedrin comes along and say chelev is mutar, avada, you can't listen to them. Meish shayga mipati. What does that teach us? Malami shein chayavim el al davar im shigas maisa. Sugas that we've learned at length, and Sanhedrin, etc. They're only going to be chayiv for, who's in helam davar with a maisa that was a shaygig. Says the Gemara. Okay, we've been darshaning some psukim in Yecheskel. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Zochar Oisayish Latoiv. Remember that guy. Remember that man favorably. Whom Chanina ben Chizkiyahu Shemai. His name was Chanina ben Chizkiyahu Shel Malihu. Not for him, Nigna Savior Yecheskel. Savior Yecheskel would have been hidden. Shayot Dvarim Saishim Divrei Torah, because they'd have face value. Seems to contradict the words of Torah. Ma'asa, what did this incredible Yid Chanina ben Chizkiyahu do? What he did was he brought up 300 barrels of oil to fuel his lamp, that he could keep on learning and learning and learning Zakrashi, and he darshened even these esoteric psukim in Yecheskel. And from there, after that short segue into these psukim in Yecheskel, we continue with the Gemara on the bottom of Memhei Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Shimon, quoting the end of the Mishnah, Shitas Rabbi Shimon. Emayulam parim merubim. Rav Shimon, at the end of the Mishnah, after learning that these were not ma'akev one another, says Rav Shimon, if we have parim merubim, then but you don't have enough nesachim, what do? You bring one par with its nesachim and nothing more. Says the Gemara Tanur Rabbanan, quoting a pasuk, ve'ifa lapar, ve'ifa la'ayil, yasu mincha. You make an ephah for a bar, an ephah for the aisle, and you create a mincha of like kvasim ashatasi yadai for the sheep, that which you can afford. V'shemen hin le'ephah, and a hin of oil per ephah. Amar Rav Shimon, v'chimidas parim ve'ilim achasi. Is it the same midah? Is it the same measurement for a bar and an aisle? El shem ayulem parim merubim v'lo ayu nisach. And this is where Rav Shimon got his drasha from. Yivi parecha nisachav v'al yakrivu kulam b'le nisachim. As we turn over to B'meim and Beis. But if you have Elim Merubim, L'ayolem Eifasam, then yes, you have Yuayel Echad Ve'Eifasai, but L'ayikrivu Kulam L'Eifos. It's the same drasha about the Nesachem we have about the Eifah, the only bring that which you're able to bring with its appropriate counterpart of the carbon, but not to bring the animal by itself. We continue with the Mishnah, Memheim and Beis, the top of the Amid. The Heim and Beis is really going to bring us back to some of the karbanos that we've been speaking about, the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, that's brought together with an Oila Par, Shtei Ilim, Sheva Kavasim, Machatos, Shlamim, etc. Says the Gemara, Habar Va'ilim Vakvasim Vasuir, Ein Makvinas Alechem. All those karbanos are not ma'akev, the bringing of the Shtei Alechem of Shavuos. V'lo Alechem ma'akvin, nor is the bringing of the Lechem ma'akev, bringing the rest of the karbanos of Shavuos. Halechem ma'akev asaykevasim. However, says the Mishnah, the Lechem is ma'akev the kvasim of the karban shlamim. Ve'ina kvasim ma'akev alechem de Rabbi Kiva. Amar Rav Shimon ben Nanas. Ki. No, he argues. Elak vasim akvenis alechem, alechem in akvenis akvasim. Shkein matzinu. We find such a precedent, says Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas. Sheisaba midbar mem shani kervu kvasim beloy lechem. Afkan Dr. Shimon ben Nanas, that even applies weiter. Kan ikrivu kvasim beloy lechem. Amar Rav Shimon alachi divri ben Nanas. Aval, however, ein atam kidvarav. Why? Excuse me. They brought in the midbar. Depends where the ksiva was given. So says the Gemara, let's dive into the Shtei Alechem, the special carbon of Shavuos, and how it relates to the different carbonos of the day. Tanu Rabbanon v'yikratim alechem chayv alechem v'yikratim alechem, says the Torah. And you bring these carbonos al alechem. What does that indicate? Chayva al alechem. That there's only an obligation when you have the lechem. Continues the Torah, Shivas Kvasim to me, and Aval Pi, and that part of the pasuk seemingly indicates that the Shiva Kvasim is what? Aval Pi Shein Lechem. Em Kemata Malamer Ala Lechem, Malame Shenes Chayvu Bikvasim, Koidem Shenes Chayvu Lechem Tevi Tarvin. What do you do with the extra drasha? The extra drasha teaches us that you're not chayiv with the lambs and other karbanos until you're chayiv in the lechem, until the tzivoy, until the time came they had to bring the lechem. Rav Kiva Aimer Yachlein Kvasim Amurin Kan Ein Kvasim Amurin B'Chumash Pekudim. Zok Rabbi Kiva, no, I would think that these Kvasim in Bramik Vayikra are the same as the Kvasim in Devarim. So Amarta, I'll tell you that's not true. Kshata Magia Eitzel Parim Ve'ilim Eino Yein. When you reach the Kvasim and the Parim and the Elim, you see that it's not the same. Why? Because in Vayikra we said Parechad V'shtei Elim, whereas in Devarim we say Shtei Parim V'ayol Echad. Elo halalu ba'im biglal atzman, v'halalu ba'im biglal lechem. So what do we see? One of them is indeed dependent, and one is independent. Nimsa. Ma'ashem rucham mishabikudim karev midbar. Ma'ashem b'teres kayanim loy karev midbar. Says Gemara, how do you know? V'delma barim ve'elim lavinu. Maybe the barim, the elim in Vayikra and the barim are not the same. However, but the lambs, they are the same number of lambs, so maybe they are the same. Says the Gemara, no, but these change also. Maybe the Torah is teaching you as follows. Maybe it's multiple choice. Maybe the Torah is teaching you to bring either one. Says the Gemara, but the Ishtani, Sidron, Shmamina, Queen, and for the fact that I wrote them in different orders, shows us that they're different karbanis. We continue with the end of the Mishnah, which was what? That the lechem upon him, the shtei alechem, is ma'akev, the kvasim, is ma'akev, the two lambs of the karban shlamim. Says the Gemara, which is Rabbi Akiva came along and said that the lechem is ma'akev the kvasim, but the kvasim are not ma'akev the lechem. My time is Rabbi Akiva. Kamar Yiu, says Rabbi Akiva, we learn Yiu miti yenu. Malalo lechem, avkan lechem. We're trying to figure out which one is ikr. Benan is kamar Yiu. Malan kvasim, avkan kvasim. Oh, benan is nami nel miti yenu. Rabbi Akiva Joshua. Malalo lechem, avkan lechem. Tani Yiu miu, benan miu miti yenu. My nafkamina. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. What's the difference? That the words are exactly the same. A famous kasha. Says the Gemara, we know that when it comes to drasha, it's a different form of the word can be used, as we see from Rabbi Yishmael. So what's the difference over here? Says the Gemara, a classical teretz that we have all over Shas, that whenever there's something more similar, we learn it out from that which is indeed more similar. Rabbi Kiva, so what about Rabbi Kiva? So Rabbi Kiva says, you're right. The word is better, but the context is not. Says Rabbi Kiva, I rather done in davar shematana lekoyin is given to the koyin, something is given to the koyin. La'afuke, which comes to exclude anu da'oilais, ninu, excludes the karbanis which are oilais and are not given to the koyin. A second teretz, Bikra Gufa Kamifli, they argue about the pasuk Alein. Kaidesh Yil Hashem LaKayin, says the Torah. Rabbi Kiva Savar is out Davar Shekula LaKayin. Havi Omer Zelechem, says Rabbi Kiva. What goes all the way to the Kayin? That's the Lechem. But Nane says no. Miksiv Kaidesh Yil LaKayin. Kaidesh Yil Hashem LaKayin. Excuse me. Kaidesh says Benanish Kaidesh Yil Hashem LaKayin. Ezeu davar shemiksasi lashemiksasi lakayin. It says benanis. There's a nikud over here. There's a detail that is not kulei lakayin. It's partial kayin, partial Hashem. Have you oimer elu kvasim? So what does Rabbi Kiva respond? Miksiv kodesh yil Hashem lakayin, Hashem kayin ksiv. Ravuna dam Ravuna kanoi Hashem minasu lakayin. Says Rabbi Kiva, it's like Ravuna has taught us that Hashem has acquired and He gave it to the kayin. That's the context of having both in the pasuk. But does it mean that it's actually an entity like the kvasim, like Rav Tarfin said, that both belongs to the kayanim and to the kayan and to Hashem? Pick it up from here, b'siyata d'shmaya.